Welcome to Honey in the Rock, a podcast for women. Here we believe in finding sweetness even in the most difficult places. Each story you will hear is a testament to God's faithfulness, showing that even in the wilderness, He provides honey from the rock. Join us as we listen to real, raw, and redemptive stories that remind us of God's goodness and grace no matter what life brings. This is Honey in the Rock, sweet stories from hard places. Let's get started. So before we really dive into your story that you're going to share, just tell everyone a little bit about who you are.
Who am I? I feel like I'm just staring into your eyes. Like, where do I look?
My eyes are a great place.
I am originally from Albuquerque.
It's New Mexico for those of you who are, what's the word? Geographically.
Oh, yes.
Which I am.
There are no pesos in Albuquerque. It's New Mexico. It's a state.
What is peso? What does that mean?
Pesos. It's the
pesos.
It's the pesos.
Pesos.
It's the currency for money in Mexico.
Oh, okay. Yes,
well, I don't think it's the currency, but a peso is. We're starting off so great. I've already offended so many people.
I'm like, what's pesos? Pesos. No, this is perfect.
I feel the need to now just Google a peso when
it's a money. It's a form of money currency
in Mexico,
like a penny or a quarter.
Correct.
A peso.
When I first moved here, I was at a Sally's Beauty Supply of all places, and I don't know why they saw my license or something happened. Okay, so it is 1 Mexican peso. Peso. This is already going great. And anyway, she was like, oh my gosh, like, how are you enjoying the States? Like, are the pesos different? And I was like, well, New Mexico is a state.
In the United States of America.
There's California, Arizona, and New Mexico. So,
that's
where I'm from.
I love that that's as far as we've gotten in your introduction. Okay, move on.
I say we, but I moved out here when I was 19. I started with an internship with Disney and then just stayed there. I fell in love with it. So I've been here really since 2010. Met my husband here in San Diego. We have been married it'll be 5 years.
Oh my gosh.
I know. You married us. Spoiler alert. We have a beautiful daughter named Penelope. She's 2.5. And we live in San Diego, so 45 minutes from Oceanside.
Yeah. I love it.
I say that as if people have a relation to where we're recording the podcast, but now they do.
Well, I mean, yeah.
We're on a couch in Oceanside.
We are on a couch in Oceanside, and she had to drive 45 minutes to get here.
I did.
To share this message with all of you. Oh, this is going to be a great conversation. Okay, let's get started on your story.
All right.
Which you haven't shared with a ton of people. Some people know now, but you have not advertised what you walked through in 2024.
Right.
So for those of you who don't know, I'm her daughter's godmother, and she's also my best friend, and I'm not ashamed to say that. Pastors also get to have best friends and be unapologetic for it. So I had an up close and personal, is that how you say it? Up close and personal view of this last year with Raquel. So I'm really excited for you to unpack it so everyone else can hear everything you've walked through and are continuing to walk through. All right, take us back.
Wow, I don't even really know where to start. I'll just start at really where my life was at the time.
Yeah.
my husband and I are Navy, so we were up for orders, which is basically just the military letting us know what his new job is going to be and where we're going to live.
Yeah.
And we had really thought and prayed about what we wanted to do, and there was an opportunity for us to go to Sicily
Yeah.
in Italy. I just want to make sure because we've covered a
Which
lot of
is
geography.
not in the United States.
Yes, covered a lot of geography. I just want to make sure that's clear. And so we had been selected. So we were in the process of really picking up our whole life to move to Europe. And so, I mean, just in the process of selling our home,
Mm-hmm.
getting our dogs there, which is a mission, and right smack dab in the middle of that, I went to a dentist appointment of all places,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm laying there, and the dentist, who was a lovely, like, I believe Filipino,
Mm-hmm.
that is only relevant because it was just, he had the thickest accent when he was asking me all of these questions. And he's cleaning my teeth, and he's like, "Are you tired?" And I just remember thinking that was such a weird question for the
Yeah.
dentist to be asking. And I responded, I was like, "Yes, I am. I have a toddler. I'm exhausted, actually." He was like, "No, are you like really, really tired?" I said, "Well, yeah, but again, I have a toddler." And he then said, like, "You need to get a physical and you need to have your thyroid checked." And again, I'm still not really thinking anything of it because
Right.
I'm at a dentist and he's talking to
Yeah.
me about my thyroid. And he's like, "Yeah, you really should get a physical." So I already had a physical scheduled the following week. Ironically, I was just kind of knocking out all my
We
appointments.
say ironically.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
I was just knocking out all my appointments, and I mentioned to the doctor, "Hey, my dentist actually said you needed to look at my thyroid." And he took a look at my neck, he touched it, and he was like, "Listen, there's a couple little nodules there." He explained to me how nodules are very common,
Mm-hmm.
all the things. I'm not a big worrier.
Mm-mm.
And so I was just like, "Okay, great. Let me know." So I ended up going through a series of, as you do, ultrasounds, biopsies, and ultimately in January of 2024 got the call that I had papillary carcinoma, which is a really just fancy way of saying thyroid cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just my husband was on the phone with me, and looking back, it really is how they portray when someone finds something out like this in the movies. I remember the room just like going completely just kind of foggy.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter was napping. My husband was on the phone, and the doctor was saying a lot of words. I really don't remember much of what he said after "you have cancer."
Mm-hmm. It's heavy.
Yeah.
So you have this call. You get the call that no one wants to hear.
Right.
And what is going through your mind at that moment? Like, and Tim's mind? Like, how are
Yeah.
you guys in the very first, like, I would say moments and days? What were your first kind of default reactions to this news?
It was a lot. I mean, I think the first reaction I had was just shock, just initial, holy smokes, I have cancer, like not my cousin or not someone I've heard
Yeah.
down the lunch line, like I have cancer. And, you know, even though they share, because thyroid cancer is fairly common, it's also highly treatable.
Mm-hmm.
So you have those facts, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone I had spoken to in that first couple of weeks was like, this is an excellent prognosis. This is great. But you still, or I still had this thing in my body. And I'm still looking at my daughter and I'm thinking like, oh my goodness, like, what does this mean for her?
Yeah.
What does this mean? Is this hereditary? You know, what if I don't wake up from surgery?
Yeah.
It happens all the time. Like, what if? What if? And absolutely fear of, just the unknown, uncharted territory. As far as Tim, I think same for him too.
Yeah.
Shock. Just we both went into a lot of those doctor's appointments, the biopsies, all those things, feeling like I'm young, I'm healthy,
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally fine. This is just a benign nodule.
Yeah.
It's not anything more than that. And then it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I think every stage of grief you could feel, there were moments of like extreme sadness and just really feeling scared. And then extreme moments of hope when, we would have certain conversations, but just a lot.
So you have this diagnosis. You also have these orders to go to Sicily.
Mm-hmm. I already forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of transpired next? What was the plan? What was on the docket for your up and coming how to deal with this thyroid cancer?
Well, as I mentioned to you, everyone, and by everyone I mean the doctors, because when you are diagnosed, I imagine with any cancer, but with this specific one, I felt like I had at least 17 doctors. I think there's only 5, but it feels like a lot
Yeah.
when you're in the moment. And everybody was like, we see this all the time. This is what we're going to do. This is the plan. Boom, boom, boom. We'll have you off to Sicily by the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler alert, we're recording this in February of 2025, and I live in San Diego. So, just so everybody knows. But we once orders are rolling in the military, you can't just stop them. And so we really had to continue to see the process out with everything that was happening. So I was scheduled for surgery in March, the 18th specifically, which is a whole other issue we'll tackle because that got moved, as you know, and there were little God winks in that. But we ended up ultimately, after everything, the Navy just couldn't approve us to go because of the specific care that I would need. But I think we're battling like life's most challenging issues all at once. So we're in the process of moving overseas. I have cancer. We're selling our home. We were dealing with a lot of stuff relationally.
And you have a toddler.
And we have a toddler.
Yeah.
A lot packed into just a very, very small time frame.
It was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
In your initial discovery of cancer, kind of two questions. What was your view towards God, and how did this impact your faith in that season? And kind of another question would be and I know some of the answers, but did you rally the troops, or did you keep this on the DL? What was that process like, and why did you make those decisions?
Yeah, so I think you'll have to remind me of what your questions were, but in
Kind of your
terms
faith,
of,
God, in
yeah,
all of this.
in terms of my relationship with God and my faith, I think I can say now that my faith had really not been battle tested.
Mm-hmm.
Like I came to know the Lord, truly know the Lord, and walking in alignment with Him in 2019.
Yeah.
So I've gone through a lot of storms without the Lord. But in terms of being battle tested in my faith as it is now, that really hadn't happened. I think I thought it did,
Yeah.
but it didn't. And so I went through a lot of stages, I would say, in my faith as well. I never ever renounced my faith or doubted that God was God.
Yeah.
And that He was faithful. I never doubted that. That never changed. But I was very disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have a lot of, I would say, uprooted feelings of rejection in this process. I struggle with, I should say I struggled with. I think I'm pretty good now, but in a lot of my story of my upbringing, I really struggled with rejection. And I went into this. So I'll kind of loop the questions all together.
Mm-hmm.
When we found out, we told people who we knew would not contribute to the fear,
Mm-hmm.
but who would contribute to what we were believing for. And that was a miracle of full, total, radical healing.
Yeah.
So we told our pastors, our
Yeah.
church family, we told our prayer warriors who've
Yeah.
been in our lives and who've walked through things with us. And we told obviously our close friends and family, but we were really selective about who we let walk through that
Mm-hmm.
season with us. And we can talk about that a little bit more, but I really went into this season believing wholeheartedly
Mm-hmm.
that God was going to heal me. I fought for that.
Mm-hmm.
People fought for that for me. People who have more faith and have seen more miracles than I ever will in my life. And I was really blissfully childlike faith,
Yeah.
without any, but he can't, but he won't. I mean, I went into every ultrasound prior to my surgery thinking they're going to call me and tell me that all of these cancer cells shriveled up and died.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what happened,
Yeah.
And so I think I went through just, okay, Lord, you are going to heal me. And then it was like, okay, you haven't healed me yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe next week. Like there just was because I found out in January, just for context for the people listening, I found out in January and my surgery was in March. So in my mind, I'm like, Lord, that is plenty of time to make this a miracle story.
Yeah.
You know? And through that, I just felt like things kept getting a little worse. And I remember going to see the surgeon, and he gets through the whole spiel and everything's fine. And me and my husband are sitting there and we're like, okay. And I was like, I don't know if this is like something I should ask, but I sing, like I'm a worship leader at my church. And
Mhm.
like, is there going to be any impacts to my voice? And it's just, don't get me started on how frustrating it is that you have to do your own research. So everyone listening, please do your own research on
Advocate
everything.
for yourself.
Advocate for yourself, please. And then they're like, "Oh, great question. Yes, absolutely. This surgery could go horribly wrong. But it's a low risk." And again, the room darkening moment happens, right? And I like look at my husband and I'm like, God, like, you gave me this gift.
Yeah.
Like, what in the world? And in my mind, I'm like, and you knew how hard it was for me to pick up a microphone again, just in my life, you know? And I'm like, what is happening? And again, we leave the appointment. My husband's like, honey, it's a small risk. It's not going to happen. That is not going to be your story, But I'm like, what in the world? And, went to another appointment after that. And they're like, we just want to be really, really sure that our plan for surgery is the right one. We're going to do another ultrasound. I'm like, okay. I'm supposed to go into surgery in like a few days, but they want to double check. I get a call that there's not only lymph nodes that were impacted on the right side of my neck, but there's now lymph nodes that were impacted on the left. And so instead of removing just half of the thyroid, we're going to do a full thyroidectomy. And so there were just like little moments and parts of the story. And for people listening, and even now looking back, I think like, okay, from January to March, it seems like such a small window of time. But when you're in it,
It didn't feel small when
yeah,
it didn't feel small during that time.
it feels like you're like, it just feels like such a long period of time. And I do admittedly, I hate saying this now, but I just remember my faith just chipping.
Yeah.
And chipping and chipping and chipping. And the worship got harder.
Yeah.
The prayers got a little more ugly. The callus started to build a little bit. And I didn't necessarily see it then.
Right.
But I see it now. And so I kind of started to do with God what I have learned to do with people when I'm hurt by them or when, and I say what I learned. I don't do this now, but my initial reaction to hurt, often my flesh, is wall. Okay, you're going to be over there. I'm going to be over here. And I'm disappointed by you and you hurt me.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, it started really, really high. It started to diminish. We brought in particular people. And just one thing I'll say about that is, we had to protect our peace.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people just don't know what to say. and their worry becomes your worry, or their thoughts become your thoughts, and you kind of just have to isolate, which is, I think, what we did.
Yeah. Isolate and not in a bad sense. You guys isolated on intentionally with the right people to process with. You didn't isolate from church. You didn't isolate
Right.
from friends. And yeah, so I mean, usually in the case of like, don't isolate yourself, but this is a different kind of.
Right.
And I would just say, I think that was such wisdom. I think when people are walking through such challenging times, there are people who overshare. And by oversharing, they are letting anyone and everyone into their very real and vulnerable business.
Right.
It's like there's a reason when you're in a hospital and you have an open wound, they don't just let anyone walk into
That's
the
so good.
surgeon room,
Right.
the operating room,
It's fine.
or the surgeon room. I use technical words, guys.
Only technical words.
Yeah, there's a reason. It's a sterile, protected environment so that you aren't
So
getting
good.
outside bacteria. They're trying to
Yeah.
minimize the impact that it's going to make on your body. And I think the same care needs to be for our emotions, our soul, our spirit when we are filleted open,
Yes.
going through hell, and we feel torn apart, however that may be. And that may not be cancer for you, but it could be a divorce, it could be discovery of infidelity, it could be the loss of a child. Like
Everything.
it could be so many things where you feel so emotionally vulnerable. And so I do think that there's such wisdom in being choosy and particular about, and I love what you said, we were intentional to protect our peace and surrounded ourselves with people who would support the faith and what we were believing for. Just,
And one thing I'll say too about that, just to anybody going through it, people aren't always going to understand those boundaries.
no.
We had plenty of people who were really upset about that. Like, well, you never answer when I call, or you don't text me back,
Yeah.
you know? And I think from people that are like Tim and I, which are naturally very responsive and very just, we love on people. So I think, people weren't really used to that version of us. But yes, like they literally say it on an airplane. Like you have to put your own mask on
Yeah.
before you can help anyone else. And really, that's what we were doing. We just needed to be in our little Miller bubble.
Yeah. 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 I think those of you who may struggle with people pleasing and not wanting to disappoint and let people down, there's a great book called Boundaries
Yes.
by Townsend. And it's boundaries are not meant, and I love that you set up boundaries. And I agree. People don't always understand, respect, appreciate, or like when you set up boundaries to protect your peace. They take it personally sometimes, like it's a personal attack against, like, how could you not? And that's also not, wasn't yours to carry. You didn't, their reaction or responses, people's responses to the boundary that you and Tim needed to make wasn't your responsibility either.
Exactly.
That's on them, which is a whole nother podcast about boundaries.
We could literally go there.
We could go there and stay there. Okay, so surgery. Your faith is struggling, understandably.
Yeah.
And yet from my perspective looking in, I knew that your faith was struggling. And yet you still stayed the course. Like it didn't deter you from, like, again, like abandoning your faith and abandoning God. But I think too, like a lot of people in these moments, like you go through these really, really hard times. And I think there are times when you're just tired. Like you are just exhausted from the day in, day out fight that it is to wage war on cancer, on whatever the case may be that is trying to take you out. And it's exhausting.
Yes.
And there is zero shame in admitting that. And I remember at times going, Raquel, let us carry the warfare for you for a while. Like you don't have to be you're not the only one praying. It's okay if you just sit and cry. And you've got still people that are waging war on your behalf.
Right.
And so it's, I say that because I think at times we feel like if I'm not strong 100% of the time, I'm failing. And that's just not the case, like in life and in battles, like even just real battles, like they get breaks.
Yes.
They tap in, they tap out, you know?
Exactly.
It's like they relieve one another. Or I'm thinking of and I'm not going to use any people's names in the Bible because my brain isn't working, but there was a guy that was like, it might have been Moses, it might have been Joshua, I don't remember, but it's in the New Testament, Old Testament, where he was like, as long as his hands were up, the battle that was being won, and his arms were getting tired.
Abraham.
I don't know. We know our Bible so well.
So good.
But even him, he had people that came alongside and held up his hands when he physically could not and did not have the strength to continue on. And I think it's such a beautiful picture of what the body of Christ is for each other in these kind of moments. Like you don't have to do it alone, and you are allowed to have moments where you're like, I can't fight right now. Can you fight for me? I just need to I need to just take a bath and have a good cry and have a moment or two or three. So I just want to give people that permission.
Oh, absolutely. You know? I think especially for people who have been raised or grown up in situations where they have to be strong. There is no other option than to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go and go and go. And so, yes, the permission to just say, I'm going to lay my sword down for today.
Yeah.
Or the next 3 months.
It wasn't that for you.
It wasn't that for me. But
you took a few weeks off at times, and it was okay.
Yeah. I wish it was for the reasons of truly needing to take a break and not just trying to run from God, even though that's impossible, instead of just facing him and sharing the ugly right away.
Well, yeah, but that's why this is a journey and it's a process. And when you've never navigated these waters, you are allowed to fumble your way through it.
Yes, lots of fumbling.
Okay, so tell us what happened next.
So they ended up making the decision to remove my full thyroid, which I just had such a hard time with because the thyroid just does so much for the body. And for some reason, I could wrap my head around having half. Like, it just made it easier to bite off and chew than removing the full thyroid. I'm sure there's people who know me that are listening and people who don't. For context, I really try to do things naturally. So the thought of being on a medication, a synthetic hormone for the rest of my life really bothered me. It legit went against a lot. And again, my husband would just laugh because he's like, of course it's you. Of course it's you. But it's like, and I'm like.
You who read every label.
Yes. And I'm like, oh no. Not every label. I wear a full face of makeup and refuse to compromise that. So there were just things that I was wrestling with, but because they found more, they had to move the surgery date back a week.
Yeah.
And I ended up having a different surgeon. And there's been a lot of God winks in this process, which I'm sure we'll talk through. But the surgeon that I ended up having was phenomenal. He was just wonderful. He's just one of my favorite physicians and just really took care of me and really was everything that I prayed for.
Yeah.
And I go in and it was supposed to be, they told my husband 2 to 3 hours tops. Like, this is easy. We do this every day.
Like under anesthesia.
Boom, bam, we're out. I wake up 9 hours later.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure everyone in my life was like, what is going on? Because my husband is like, it's only supposed to be 2 to 3 hours. I wake up, everything's good. And before I went under, I basically had a conversation with this fabulous surgeon. And I said, listen, I still don't feel really good about taking the whole thyroid, but I'm going to leave it up to you. I said, when you go in, you've seen a million of these things. You know what cancer looks like at this point. I trust you. If you go in and it's ugly, get it all out, like whatever you need to do. So my surgery, because I asked that, and when I woke up, he's like, I'm so sorry it took so long. I just wanted to do the surgery the way I would have wanted it done on me. And he just did so many things during that surgery above and beyond what he was initially even supposed to do in terms of just getting everything out. He knew that I sang, so he was just going really slow and being so cautious of where he was.
Yeah.
And he ended up just, being just like a little angel, because when it came to a little bit later down in my journey, when I had to like figure out, okay, what's the dose of radiation? The doctor, he's a nuclear medicine doctor. That always sounds so fancy.
It does.
Told me that if my surgery wouldn't have been as prestige as it was and just to the T, that I probably would not have been able to go on a lower dosage of radiation, which was needed for some fertility concerns that I had. And so there were moments in that, even at my lowest in the surgery, there were moments where I was like, thank you, Lord. Thank you for pushing the surgery back a week and having a different surgeon be there. Thank you for the nurses and the corpsmen and the lovely people that you put in my path when I was at the hospital, who just made me laugh and had so much fun.
Yeah.
So that was the surgery. And then so it gets confusing because a lot of people think like radiation is interesting because it can be a lot of different things. I had to do radioactive iodine therapy, which isn't necessarily the same as radiation, but it's like under the same umbrella. And so after I recovered from my surgery, then I went in for that process, and that started, which luckily only needed to be one session.
And took about a week to be isolated for that one.
Yeah.
Is that right? If I remember correctly. That
was a weird one. Surgery was kind of like, okay.
Well, recovery was a lot different than you anticipated it
would
be.
100%.
I think all of us, we were not expecting.
No. Again, advocate for yourself, because there was so much I didn't know. Like up until the week before, I was still breastfeeding. There was like so many things that if they didn't fall into place, that wouldn't have worked out. I had tubes coming out of my neck. I looked like Frankenstein.
Well, and one of those God winks was Penelope and breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell that?
Yeah. So Penelope, was 18 months. And again, if you know me, this isn't a surprise to you, but I loved breastfeeding. And maybe it's a good thing because I would probably still be doing it at 2.5. Breastfeeding was one of my favorite things ever. And the week before my surgery, Penelope just like weaned herself. I actually remember sending you a voice memo or calling you or something and just saying like, oh my gosh, like this whole time I thought I was going to have to break her heart, but I'm actually glad she's breaking mine. But I remember just feeling God be like, just so present in that. And it just being one more little thing that was just like,
I've got you.
I've got it. Like,
Yeah.
she's good. And thank goodness she weaned because there's no way I was breastfeeding in the condition that I was in when I came home. There's just no way. I couldn't even see her for a week and a half because she would have the drains would have either scared her or she would have ripped them out and scared me.
Yeah.
Would have really hurt. But yeah, so that recovery wasn't what I expected it to be, but it definitely was hard. But I think the radiation therapy was a little more challenging for me because of the isolation factor. And again, I'm like, what am I putting into my body that no one can get near me for the next week? You know, I remember one of the corpsmen, it's a nurse, but at the Naval Hospital, they're called corpsmen. He was actually one of my corpsmen back when I had surgery. So he like took care of me when I was, recovering. And then I ran into him when I was doing my radioactive iodine. And he's in there like trying to help me from behind like a wall. Like I had to it was just the weirdest thing. And he was like, ma'am, do you mind if I ask you a question? And I'm like, what's up? He's like, if we all have to stay away from you and if this is like crazy, like we can't even touch your trash, like why are they letting people put this in their body? And I'm like, exactly. Go get your thyroid checked.
You're like, also go ask a doctor this question,
I know.
not the patient that's just.
We were already on great terms and he was fabulous. But, so again, I'm like, everything that I just naturally lean towards is not happening. There's nothing natural about what's happening. But the isolation, I mean, it was like 5 days, so 2 days in the hospital, almost 3. And then a week away from, my daughter. And couldn't sleep, so nauseous, like not really able to keep anything down. The just radioactive iodine, it's weird. You got to have a weird diet and, it's still radioactive. So you're going to get nauseous, but just a lot of isolation, being alone, a lot of thinking, a lot of time to just be like, where is the honey in the rock? That was at the time when my daughter was born, that was one of my favorite songs. I used to play it for her all the time and she was like itty bitty. And I remember listening to that song and just being like, no idea where it is.
Yeah. It's just a rock right now.
I was really careful about who I shared that with because I still felt really responsible for leading people well.
Yeah.
But when you're nauseated in a hospital room by yourself. It's just hard to find it, you know?
Yeah.
It's hard to process it all.
In those days of isolation, did you even talk to God? Was it too hard to talk to him at that time? If you did you hear were you able to hear back, or was just the noise too loud in your mind?
I can't remember. I really can't. I do remember because I had to stay in a hotel. I remember the first night of getting to the hotel, just not being able to sleep at all. It was just, I felt so tormented. Like, and I remember feeling like this isn't just, I can't sleep. This isn't just
Mm.
anything. I remember just instantly knowing that it was spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just did what I do when it's spiritual. I literally turned on worship. I started worshiping and singing and praying, but I wasn't praying in a way of like surrendering and submitting my heart to God. I was like fighting a war against the enemy.
Yeah.
Because I felt only things that he brings. I felt fearful. I'm not really scared of the dark, but I like had the light on while I was sleeping. It was just really weird.
Yeah.
Like it was almost like I was just allowing fear and anxiety and worry to just overtake me. And I had just become so engulfed in what was going on. And I was focusing, so my perspective was so focused on,
Yeah.
I don't have a thyroid anymore. The cancer might come back. It's linked to breast cancer. Breast cancer runs in my family, right? Like,
Just snowball.
it
Yeah.
was just, there really wasn't like a hopeful, and at this point, I'm fully removed from community because I wasn't able to go to church for a few weeks
Yeah.
after surgery. This is like early June. So I had just been really disconnected from the building body, if
Right.
you will. And I had just really allowed the enemy to just get in my mind and torment me and scare me and fill me with fear. And that night, I just decided I was done with that.
Mm-hmm. Did you get breakthrough?
Yeah. I literally heard footsteps walking away from my hotel door.
That's cool.
It wasn't at the time.
I forgot about that part of the story.
Because it was this was at like 3:00 in the morning. I mean, no one was moving.
Right.
Nothing was happening. And I had been in worship it was like 4 at this point because I had been in worship for at least an hour.
Wow.
I was like, I'm not turning it off until we're done here.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started, I was like, okay, I don't really even know what I'm like fighting. And then as I just kept going, it just kind of became more and more apparent to me. But it sounded like big boots,
Wow.
like walking away from the door or past the door. But no one, like everybody was asleep. I was in a hotel.
Yeah.
And not like a hotel where people are bopping around at 4 a.m.
Yeah. Wow. It's powerful.
Yeah,
Worship really is warfare.
it is.
And I know that worship was a huge staple all throughout this journey.
It was.
At times, singing it in very little faith, but wanting it to be true.
Mm-hmm.
At times, you couldn't even sing it, just tears flowing down because it was so real and so raw. And at times very prophetic statements that you were standing on
Yep.
and declaring, and a whole lot more. Just, I love that. I want everyone to like grasp like how powerful worship is. That
It's
it is
so
it is
powerful.
so just not like Christian karaoke. It is a weapon of warfare and an anchor, like especially when the worship songs are anchored in God's word.
Right.
And they aren't just like, look at me, God.
Right.
Yeah, they're not like so introspective, but they're like, they're rooted in God's word and or really pointing us to the character of who God really is, and
Right.
reminding us the greatness and the vastness and and how big and awesome and powerful and able he is. Like those songs, not those songs, just any of those kind of worship songs have gotten me as well through some of my toughest seasons.
Yep.
And I've gone to war with worship songs as well. It's been, I always say worship is my superpower. Like it's been like the thing in my life, because I too am a worshiper, and I used to lead worship before we moved here. And it was a huge part of my makeup and the foundation of who I am. And it has been like that one thing that when I feel like I can't even hear God in moments, all I have to do is like put on a worship song. If I'm feeling like, and it's been a while where I haven't felt the presence of God, I get that worship music on and I just sit and sing, and it's not too long before you feel the peace, the river of peace coming and flowing in. Even if you don't feel the goosebumps, it's like it still shifts things.
It shifts everything.
Yeah.
Like your husband, Matthew, says, you don't read the Bible reads you.
Yeah.
Or something. He says something like that.
Yeah.
I really feel that worship is similar in that it shifts your perspective.
Yeah.
When you're declaring, God is not against me.
Yeah.
You might not believe it, but you are standing on a promise.
Yeah.
You're standing on what we know to be true about the faithfulness of God. And it is really hard. It is really hard. There were so many times when I told Tim, man, like, I don't even know if I believe it, but I don't believe it for me anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm up here worshiping, I'm singing, I trust in God, but I'm actually singing that for that woman crying over there because I know he can do it.
Yeah.
He's not doing it for me right now.
Yeah.
But I know he could do it for her. So like the
Yeah.
faith didn't leave, but it was really me needing to like put one foot in front of the other and just continue to remember what he has done, what he has said, what he has promised, unrelated to worship, but on the topic of believing for someone else, during this whole season, I'm like going through it, and I am not getting healed. And in the way that I want to be healed, I should say that. And I go up for prayer, and I go up to pray for someone. This young man comes up to me, and I'm like, hi, what do you want to pray for? And he's like, well, I just want to pray. I just want to like thank God. And I'm like, yes, what are we thanking God for? And he's like, he just radically healed my mom of stage 4 cancer. Like there's no more cancer left in her body. And I remember in that moment feeling like God sent me this person. This was a divine appointment.
Yeah.
But not as the enemy would want me to think it is.
Yeah.
Not as like a, ha,
I'm
you're
gonna
not
rub it in
good
your
enough to be healed. It was another declaration of, He can, and he will.
Yeah.
And so we just need to wait.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have the surgery, your thyroid's removed, you have radiation. The way that you wanted and contended for healing did not happen in what you 100% believed was going to happen.
Right.
And it rocked your faith.
Oh, 100%.
What began to shift? What started turning the tide in your heart and changing for you, kind of the turning point? Because I know you're not where you were at,
Mm-hmm.
however long ago that was.
Yeah.
I can't do math.
I wish I could say that there was this like
One thing.
one
Right.
thing and like snap of the fingers. I don't know where I got stack from. Snap of the fingers, like boom, my heart is turned. It was a process
Mm-hmm.
because it, like I mentioned to you, it just kept like the bad news just kept tacking on. Before I went into radiation, it was like, oh, and by the way, high doses of radiation cause infertility. And so we need to.
Which was another thing. You had to ask questions they did not tell you.
Yep. I happened to be doom scrolling at 2 a.m. on the Harvard Health website and just learned that this was a side effect of radioactive iodine. And when I brought it up to them, they were like, oh, that's a great question. And I'm like, oh, wow. You didn't want to mention that to a woman in her childbearing years? Okay. But that rocked me.
Yeah.
My dream forever in my whole life before anything else was to be a wife and a mom. And then once I became a mom, have dreams in my heart, and my husband does too, to have sisters and brothers for Penelope. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was like, what? To the point where I was like, I'm not going to do this radiation. I'm not going to do this treatment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not risking that. Like, I fully decided I was going to be God, right? I went back to like, I'm going to take control of the situation because
Yeah.
the situation is out of control and I've trusted long enough. And now
And
I'm
I'm
like,
done.
and I'm done. Like, I'm like, you're not going to do it. I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say that, but I'm saying it now because
Yeah.
that was my mentality. And my husband, who's so level-headed and so not me, was like, honey, because I was like, I had this whole plan. I'm like, okay, we're going to start trying tomorrow. And I'm going to have the baby. It's going to be great. And then I'll do the radiation.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no, time out. Like, we're going to let God be God. And we're going to focus on the family that we have in the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to let God be God with the rest.
So good.
He's so good. We could do a whole other podcast on just the marital struggles that come from cancer.
Walking through cancer.
Yes. And the importance of marrying the right person. But I had such a hard time wrestling with letting God be God.
Mm-hmm.
Because in this situation, letting God be God meant that I was going to walk through this. And I was just going to trust him.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish I could say that there was one specific thing, but there wasn't.
I mean, I'm kind of glad that there wasn't.
Yeah.
Because I think that could be disheartening to a lot of people who
Yeah.
are hearing this and in that situation, that it wasn't just a kabam, and then it's like, yeah, I got breakthrough and everything was
No.
peachy keen and...
It's gone in stages.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like I almost kind of had to just wrestle with things separately. Like, you'd gifted me a study of Habakkuk called Even If. And I've actually now have like adopted that phrase as like my life phrase. Like, even if I will trust the Lord, whatever, like insert whatever.
Instead of what if, it's even if.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen. I studied that book. I really learned from Habakkuk, like, okay, this is how you wrestle with God, and this is how you talk to him, and this is how you have those conversations. And you're not always going to like the answer.
Yeah.
I speak through worship, and there's a bridge of a song, and it says, whether you say yes or no or wait, I will worship.
Yeah.
And another thing I've adopted is in every season, I'll praise.
Yeah.
So even if and in every season.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, two really dear women in the church taking my calls and listening to the really ugly things. It took you listening and loving me and taking care of my daughter. It took, I have a best friend named Jackie. She's like a sister to me. It took her sitting with me and not always understanding, but just listening to me. My husband, he deserves some kind of award because, he really had to walk out in sickness and in health. I mean, he really had to do that.
Yeah.
And it was a doozy. It was hard, for, again, so many different reasons. It took a lot of ugly cries and worship sessions with the Lord. And even still to this day that I have to have, because when you take out your thyroid, I think another part of me that started to feel like it kept getting worse is because they're like, oh, we just take out the cancer, we take out your thyroid, boom, bam, you take this pill, everything's great. That's not at all what my experience was.
No.
I am still in the process of balancing my hormones and every woman who's listening knows when you don't have your hormones balanced or something is off, you're a wackadoodle. You're nuts. And so, it removing the thyroid was just the start.
Yeah.
So even now, it's just continuing to have faith. If it's not good, then it's not done. And I pray that I won't always have to kick the spirit of fear, but I still have to. I still I pre-worry about the negative pregnancy test. I pre-worry about Penelope getting cancer. I pre-worry about it coming back in a different form in my body or whatever. So I think the only difference is instead of putting God out of the situation and putting my arm out and not allowing him in, the difference is that I've just decided I can't ever do that to him again. Because I was holding him to standards of man and flesh.
Yeah.
but he's not man and flesh. He's God.
Yeah.
And so he can't disappoint me.
Yeah.
It's not his character. He can't not be faithful. He can't not fulfill the promises he's made to me. And I was treating him as if he was someone on earth who would do that, a human. But
Yeah. I think, and I thought a lot about this in this last year with you, as I was like, and reading and going through Habakkuk as well. And I was like, Lord, I think you're looking for people who are willing to say, use me at any cost,
mm,
even if that means I don't get the miraculous healing when I want, even if that means fill in your worst nightmare, even if whatever. It's like, if it means that my life can bring glory to you and help reach more people and point more people to you, like, I'm willing. And I think it's not like he's not an unloving father. He's a super loving father. But I'm always reminded, like, when we're in these moments and going through these, like, huge struggles,
right.
I think it's so easy to just, we kind of just focus on me. Like, God, what about me? Like, what about me? Like, what about, like, this is impacting me so much. And it's
Yes.
so easy for us to do that.
Yes.
And we forget that God is above all of it. And he sees from beginning to end. And he sees that, well, I absolutely can heal Raquel. However, there's a nurse over here who's going to meet her in her desperation and meet her in this. And this nurse, this corpsman or whoever, is going to have and meet Jesus because Raquel was in that hospital bed. And there's this mother over here who's also going to be going through something similar. And Raquel's going to, like, and then the ripple effect of those people, because we didn't get the answered in the way that we hoped and thought and believed for. And I think we need to continue to contend, pray, hope, and believe for the miracle.
100%.
And
Yes.
so on one hand, it's like a tension. I'm absolutely going to believe you for the miracle because you are able and you are absolutely willing. And I'm going to trust that you are God and you see things that I cannot see.
Yes.
And so I'm also going to trust that you are good and you have a plan. Like you just said, if it isn't good yet, then it's not done. And I think there is, like, I think people grapple with their faith so often because they're only contending for the miracle, and they don't hold the other tension of even if.
That's a good point.
And
I certainly wasn't.
but through it, you've learned this tension,
Yes.
and it's beautiful.
Yes.
And now you're here to tell your story so that someone else that's about to go through it is going to do the same. They're going to believe for the miracle. And oh my gosh, who doesn't want that? We all want that. And I want that for every person. Every person that comes up on a Sunday morning for prayer, like, I'm always like, God, like, you absolutely can. And and if it doesn't end up the way that we thought, we're also going to trust you that you're somehow going to make something beautiful out of this mess and turn it around. And I would love to say that we always get to see that even in our lifetime, but we don't. Like, even in the Word of God, there are people in Hebrews 12 that are like, they died without ever seeing the promise.
Isn't that crazy?
That God gave them, but it was fulfilled in another generation. And that's like, can you, like, that's hard.
That is very hard.
Like, that's hard to, like,
It's hard.
yeah, but like, so in me watching you, this was my, like, grappling over here of like, am I willing, Lord, to be used by you, even if the promise isn't seen and fulfilled in my lifetime and it's fulfilled in my kids or my grandkids' lifetime.
It's tough.
Like, and I feel like my answer is yes,
Mm-hmm.
but even at that, it
Well,
has to be battle tested.
I think that I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that was one of my rock bottom moments in this journey. And it was, quick tangent, it's context. My husband and I were watching The Chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to spoil it for anybody that hasn't watched it, but there was a scene where...
I love that you're not wanting to spoil The Chosen that's based off the Bible, but that's okay.
Well, but they add stuff
They do
to like create context. So I was actually going to share the part that I'm talking about was it's not biblical. It's completely like just a,
you're not going to spoil it.
Story.
Jesus died and came back.
Right. Dun, dun, dun. But my husband and I are sitting there. He loves the show. We're like watching it. And one of the beloved characters, something happens and her, husband or husband to be basically looks at Jesus and he's like, do something. Like, I've been walking with you. I have watched you heal people you don't even know, right? Like, and this scene is happening and I'm like, this is how I feel.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, I walk with you. I tell people about you. I tithe. I believe like I am doing all the right things. I've seen you do this, right? And he's like having this exchange with Jesus, who's not Jesus, but I get up from the couch and I literally have a panic attack in the bathroom. Wow. I'm so upset. I'm just freaking out. And I text a lady from our church and I'm like, I need to talk to you. I don't care when it is. And I ended up talking to her the next day. And I asked to talk to her specifically because she's a big fan of the show. I happen to know she would have already seen it. And I specifically told her, I am okay. I am okay having this faith for myself. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what I would do if I ever had to plead with God for my daughter or my husband. I was like, tell me right now what I would do if I had to do that. Because that, I think, would be where I would draw the line, Yeah. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that because that's when it gets tough. Like you said, what if I don't see this? What if I say even if, but then this happens and then I'm like, what? Yeah. And I remember feeling that so vividly, like, okay, Lord, I'm good with me. Like, fine. Yeah. Don't care. But I also had to get through that next stage of like, that's why I said it was a process for me.
But don't you dare touch them.
There were things that happened just in the course of that, from June to Christmas time that I had to literally I almost felt like it was like the Lord was just presenting me with little things to like open up more dialogue with him. Yeah. And with others and to get counsel and to again battle test my faith and really like understand, because following Jesus doesn't mean that nothing happens and life is perfect. Yeah. And I wish it was. Yeah. But I'm so glad that you said that because the even if is hard, and whether or not you'll see it on this side of eternity. Like I may never know why all this happened. I told a friend who does worship with me, I was sharing with him that I had cancer and we like walked through that season together, him and Tim and my family. And I remember looking at him and saying, like, I've finally grappled with, if I lose my voice, just thanking God for the time that he's given it to me and the time that he's allowed me to use it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm finally there.
Mm-hmm.
But that was hard.
Yeah. And spoiler alert, she didn't lose her voice.
I didn't. It's just a lot deeper. I can't quite hit those high notes like I used to.
Beautiful.
But it's got a little more rasp.
Oh, okay. So, closing thoughts. There's a God wink that I want you to share that was the kickoff to your whole story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think it's so beautiful.
It is beautiful. So I mentioned that a dentist is the one who found my little swollen nodule, which we now know was a tumor. And I had already had a follow-up appointment. So my appointment with him initially was in December, but I had a follow-up appointment in like February for something else I needed to do. I don't know if it was x-rays or what, but I told my husband, I said, well, when I go, I'm just going to like see if I can get the name of the dentist that helped me that day so I could just write him a thank you card or something.
Yeah.
Like I just want him to know.
Yeah.
And so I get my x-ray or whatever and I'm leaving and I tell the receptionist, oh my gosh, before I forget, is there any way you could look up my last appointment and just let me know the name of the dentist that helped me? I'm going to drop off a thank you card for him. And so she's like, okay, let me see the last time you were here. And she's like, was everything okay? I think she was like wondering why I would want to.
Do you want management?
Like,
do you have some complaints?
Why are you sending him a thank you card for flossing your teeth? And I just told her the whole story. And I'm like, I'm about to go into this surgery and, I had cancer. I'm telling her all this stuff. And her eyes just start filling up with tears. And I'm like, did he die? Like that. It's the first thing because he was an older gentleman. So I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh no, my angel. And she was like, you're not going to believe this. He doesn't work here. And I was like, well, no, he does. Because
he was in my mouth.
He definitely cleaned my teeth. Like, I know he works here. She was like, no, like, you're not understanding what I'm saying. She's like, he doesn't work here. He doesn't work at this clinic. She said he was only here the one day that you were here. And it was to help us because we've been so busy during the holidays. And then we're both crying at this point because I'm like, he literally saved my life. Like, I would have never known.
Never.
It was in a place where if I wasn't like feeling for it or had my head back and I would have just never noticed. And so the honey in that was that he didn't work there. And I don't know if your dentist has ever checked your thyroid, but I have never had a dentist say anything about anything other than my teeth. And so, yeah, he was only there that one day to be my little angel.
I love that. And this is what that tells me. God knew.
Oh, for sure.
He knew what was about to enter your world. And even as you got those God winks along the way and you were struggling and grappling with your faith, he was still just like, I got you and I'm in this the whole way through. And so it's just, again, it's a beautiful reminder that God isn't taken off guard when we are. And he's got us. He's going to carry us through it, even even when we've let go of his hand, he's like, it's okay. I am still in this boat with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wouldn't mind, in this latest fast that we went through, because you'd spoken already about kind of your default in the past when people disappointed you, and when you felt God disappointed you, you kind of put up a wall between him.
Yeah.
Can you just share what happened in this last fast? Because this has been a process.
Oh, it has been. Yeah, it still is. So we were doing 21 days of prayer and fasting, and I think it was day 3. I was not even praying. I was actually doing dishes. I had just put my daughter to sleep. And Goodness of God is one of my favorite songs, but I have only ever heard Jen Johnson sing it. And I'm washing dishes and I hear CeCe Winans like angelic little voice come into my earbuds, and it's her version of Goodness of God. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, this is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just washing dishes and I'm singing along, and all of a sudden I just started to feel really emotional. Like I was really, really but I was really, really, for the first time in a long time, meaning the words of all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been good. With every breath I am able. And I'm listening and I'm singing and I feel myself starting to get really emotional. And I'm like, I'm washing dishes. Like, what is happening to me right now? And I finally just put the brush down, and I just feel my chest and like my whole body really start to just like, it just felt warm. It felt like one of those electric heating blankets.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt the Lord it was just so direct, and it was just vividly his voice saying, I've been waiting for you to come back to me. I'm so glad you're back.
Mm-hmm.
Something along those lines. And it was like, I never left you.
Yeah.
But I'm not mad at you for taking some space from me because I understand.
Yeah.
It was all of that wrapped into just one little thank you for coming back to me. It's like when the prodigal's running home and there's no shame or
None.
questioning. It's just, let me put my blanket around you, my warm, loving, fatherly blanket.
Yeah.
And I love you, and that's it.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It was really special.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, I would love for you to pray for anyone that is grappling with their faith and going through a really hard season of God not answering their prayers the way that they thought he would. Before we do that, I just want to make sure, is there anything else that you wanted to share that you haven't got a chance to before we move on? I want to make sure you got it all out.
I think the only thing that I wanted to say was don't do what I did, even though it's tempting to. I think sometimes it's just our knee-jerk reaction to respond to God in the same way that we would man. And so I would say to somebody struggling in their faith that you can lean into that and you can ask God questions and you can wrestle with God.
Mm-hmm.
yes, if you push him away, he's going to welcome you back with open arms when you're washing dishes at the sink. But don't wait that long. I think there were so many moments where I had the opportunity to just allow God back in and to bring that peace. And you can hold grief and gratitude in the same hand. Kind of like you were saying, that tension.
Yeah.
You can say, God, you are faithful. You are good.
Yeah.
I will see the goodness of God. And you can also say, this sucks.
Yeah.
This is hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
But I would say just instead of running from God, run to God. That would be my only add-on.
That's good. Would you pray?
Yes. Dear Lord, first and foremost, we just thank you for who you are. We thank you, Jesus, for your love, your unconditional love, Lord, your warm embrace when we walk away or we take some time, Lord. We thank you that you're just always waiting with your hand to bring us back. Lord, I just thank you for the woman listening today who might be struggling in her faith or struggling believing for a miracle or believing for her healing. Lord, I would just ask that you would just be with her, God.
Yeah.
That you would speak to her in that still small voice, that you would be her comforter, Lord, that you would just give her God winks throughout her journey, Lord, so that she'll know that you're there holding her hand, walking alongside of her. And although your plan may not be to pull her out of it, Lord, let her know that you are in it with her. And so, Lord, I just thank you, Jesus. I thank you for the miracle. I thank you for the season of waiting. I thank you for when you say yes, for when you say no, and for when you say wait, God. And Lord, I pray that every woman who can hear me right now would just be filled with hope and that she would be encouraged. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for sharing your story.
Of course.
It was beautiful.
I hope so.
Someday Penelope will hear it and she'll be so proud of her mama.
Oh,
Can't wait.
yeah.
Well, ladies, thank you for joining us with another episode. This was a good one. Can't wait for you to listen to the next one. Have a great week. Thank you for joining us today. Honey in the Rock is a ministry of Grace Church in Oceanside, California. Follow us on Instagram and join our community at Honeys of Grace. If today's story encouraged you, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Remember, God is always working for our good, even if we don't see it. Until next time, may you find sweetness in your journey.